back to the Ultimate Deck Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Chapman. Great news. We've been ranked #1 podcast in the entire podcast world in the category of decks. I believe we're the only one. I've also been ranked the #1 podcast host in the world by my 2-year-old son. He's a big fan. So I'm hoping you guys are enjoying this show as much as he is. I'm here by myself again today, so that usually means we're going to get a little bit more technical. And yes, we are. One of the main questions we used to get, still get, not used to, me as a builder used to get, and we still get all the time at the retail store, and I'm sure you all get it as well, when you start talking composite decks with your customers is, I've got a cousin, they've got a composite deck, and it gets hot. Does this get hot? Yes, Karen, this deck gets hot. Very common question. Do these decks get hot? Simple answer is yes, they do. Long answer is there's some things you can kind of do to kind of mitigate the temperature, or at least put some thoughts into your head that make peace with the fact that these things get a little bit warm. But the second question is, and this comes from Karen's husband, Mike. No, wait, Dave. Dave's the name we used to pick on now, right? Dave asks, I've got a deck. It's slippery. Do you have something that's not slippery? Great answer, Dave, is yes, we do. Last summer, up in good old Regina, Saskatchewan, we had a heater of a summer. We had some really nice days, and we thought, what a great opportunity to throw some of these different types of decking out in the sun, let them bake for a while, and see with our own thermometer what the real story is when these things sit in the sun and get hot. A lot of brands out there have some sort of marketing jargon that says they are cooler. You know, I've seen it from a couple different brands. There's one out there right now. Moisture Shield's got a cool deck technology. There's some others that claim to be cooler, but what does the word cool actually mean? No, I'll tell you right now, none of these stay cool. Some of them may be less hot, but none of them stay cool. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for this kind of stuff. The slippery message too, these are the two most common things we get asked at our store all the time. Does it get hot? Is it slippery? And so I'm just going to throw a lot of information out here now so we can kind of know how to deal with these questions when you get them. The first thing we're going to go through is the heat test. Now, last year, as I mentioned, we did some heat tests on a day that reached 41 degrees Celsius, which is 106 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was a warm day. It was a scorcher out there. So we threw, I don't even know what it was, I'm going to say about 60, 70 different types of decking, most of them being composite or PVC decking, plastic of some sort, but we did have some wood decking out there as well. We had some concrete out there. We wanted to make sure we had a good variety of materials so we could reference which type of materials stay a little bit less hot than others. Now, the old adage of lighter colors will stay cooler than darker colors remains true within decking. That is 100% fact in science that the deck category does not evade that. It's still true. However, you might be surprised about the lack of a difference, the minimal amount of difference in temperature from the lightest colors to the darkest colors. So let's get to this. If you want to see more about these charts, we actually did post them on our Instagram account that you can find at The Ultimate Deck Shop handle a while back, but I'll try to remember to bump those back up to the top so that you guys can have a look at these stats yourselves, see it in person, because I know you're probably driving right now, because that's where people listen to us, it's driving. Maybe not a surprise, the number 1 and number 2 and number 4 coolest options when we did these heat tests. Now keep in mind, again, this was 41 degrees Celsius, 106 degrees Fahrenheit. We put these out there first thing in the morning because we knew it was going to be a hot day. So we let them cook all day. We shot it with a digital laser thermometer 3 times in the mid to late afternoon to make sure it was at the hottest point of the day. They'd been out there all day. They'd all received equal sunlight. They were sitting, flat beside each other, equal plane. We made this as equal as we could possibly make it between all these different types. They were all sitting on the same type of material, et cetera, et cetera. The coolest material that we tested was treated lumber. Now, we had brown treated and ACQ, so the green treated and the tanner tone brown treated out there. They were very similar. About 61 to 63 degrees Celsius when it was 41 degrees out. That's 142 to 146 Fahrenheit when it's 106 Fahrenheit out. So those two, at the end of the day, if you're looking for something that stays a little cooler or a little bit less hot than other options out there, the softwood market still has that wrapped up. Now, why would that be? Well, I think part of it is softwoods aren't very dense. So these brown treated and ACQ treated in our markets are typically an SPF, so a spruce, pine, or fir, softwood lumber, so not dense. Cedar wasn't far behind. Cedar came in around 64.5 degrees Celsius or 148 Fahrenheit. So they were all within about 3 degrees Celsius of each other, or about 6 degrees Fahrenheit of each other. And those represented 3 of the 4 not coolest. I keep saying that, but don't believe me if I say cool. None of these were cool. They were the least hot of the boards we tested that day. So if that's your number one priority above all else, then maybe stick with the softwood. Cedar would be a good option. Now, I mentioned that some brands out there have some sort of marketing stamps on them or gimmicks that they play that claim that their decks stay cooler a little bit. I've seen that on Clubhouse, for example, I can't remember exactly what they call it. I've seen it on their marketing materials before about a cool technology, something or other. It doesn't stay cool. Moisture Shield's the next one out there saying that they've got a cool deck technology that keeps things cooler than other deck boards. And to a degree, it's true. But in our testing, it's not nearly as big of a gap as they claim and show at trade shows. We just finished a Regina Spring Home show, and they actually had this same setup there where they put it under a heat lamp with competing deck boards. And to your hand, under a heat lamp, the Moisture Shield Vision lines with the Cool Deck technology, which there's only 2 colors that have that technology in them, do feel less hot than the other competing boards that are on there. What we found in our testing is that there must be a difference in how the reflective material that's in the cap of that board reacts with, an ambient heat lamp versus the actual real sun beating down on it, because our results weren't nearly as much of a gap as you'll see at these shows. That said, Moisture Shield Vision with Cool Deck technology in the mochaccino color was the least hot capped composite or PVC decking in our entire test. And so that came in at 63.6 degrees. This is a 3, we shot it 3 different times, half hour apart. That's the average, 63.6 when it was 41 degrees out. That measures in at 146.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So yes, technically the coolest board we tested was the Moisture Shield with the Cool Deck technology. Their claims, however, are that it stays, I can't remember what number they use, something at like up to 25 or 30% cooler than other decks. Unfortunately for them, our second coolest deck was TimberTech Legacy in the whitewash cedar color at 64.6 degrees Celsius. So that's only 1 degree hotter. That's 148.3 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's 2 degrees hotter Fahrenheit, 1 degree hotter Celsius. It's a wash at that point. You cannot tell the difference between Moisture Shield Mochaccino with Cool Deck and TimberTech Legacy Whitewash Cedar when you touch it with your hand. They felt exactly the same to our hands, but the thermometer said technically there is an extreme minimal difference there. So the thing that those two have in common, though, is that they're both very light colors. The Mochaccino Cool Deck technology is the lightest color that has the Cool Deck. The darker Cool Deck was obviously further down and got a little bit hotter. But the whitewash cedar is probably the lightest, one of the lightest colors in all of the 7 brands that we carry and the 7 or 8 or 9 brands that we tested. So again, the adage that the lighter colors are going to stay a little bit cooler or less hot rings true here again, with whitewash cedar and mochaccino being number 1. Number 2, number 3 was Clubhouse Earth Tone Sandstone color. Again, this is very close to a white. It's an off-white kind of creamy color. So no surprise there that stayed a bit cooler than others. Wolf Serenity Cypress was in the number 5. Sorry, not the number 5 spot, but fourth or fifth plastic decking as far as temperature. And again, it's just a matter of color. It's the lightest color in Wolf Serenity Hardwood's lineup. So no surprise there that it stayed cooler as well. So the adage that lighter colors are going to stay a little bit cooler is 100% true. But let's fast forward and drop down to give you a reference point here. The next least hot was a Batu product. So a hardwood product came in at 65/149 degrees. And then we had a concrete product, Deck Tactile, at 65.7 and 150.2 degrees. So the gap between capped composites, hardwoods, softwoods, concrete, PVC, et cetera, is very minimal. It mostly boils down to color. just for reference, we did have an AZEK Harvest Slate Gray up there, a Veka Deck gray color as well, Fibron Paramount Mineral. These are all light colors that made it into the top 10 for the least amount of heat buildup. Now, the real shocker is how much of a gap there is between the best and the worst. So we talked about the coolest or least hot was softwood at about 63 point some degrees, and the least hot capped composite was also around 63 degrees. The very hottest all the way up on the other end of the scale was at about 73.5 degrees Celsius. So about 10 degrees hotter. We went up to 164 degrees in Fahrenheit for those that are tracking along in Fahrenheit. So the shocking thing is it's not a giant jump. It's 10 degrees. It is significant, but it's not as huge as you might think. And the moral of the story is here, if you're sitting in a pair of shorts on your deck and you sit down, the back of your legs is going to have an awful hard time feeling the difference between 63 and 73 Celsius or 140 and 164 Fahrenheit. They're both hot is the moral of the story here. So just keep that in mind when you're out there and people are asking, I want this color, but I'm worried it's going to be a little bit hot. You're not going to get a huge savings by changing color. We usually tell people, pick the color you like because they all get hot in the sun. I find on my own personal deck, 30 degrees Celsius, which is probably pushing about 90 Fahrenheit, I would say is kind of the threshold where I don't feel super comfortable about walking on my deck in bare feet either. It's at 30, I'm fine, but I wouldn't want my 2-year-old out there with bare feet. If it gets to about 35 or about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when things are getting a little bit hot. Throw a pair of flip-flops on, throw some shoes on. That'll help for sure. Now we had some of the hottest colors in here as TimberTech Terrain Rustic Elm is a very dark brown color that registered at 164 Fahrenheit or 73 degrees Celsius. Clubhouse Ironwood, which is a dark gray, also ended up at about the same temperature, exactly the same temperature. TimberTech Amazon Mist ended up around that same number. Trex Transcend Tropical Lava Rock colors. That's a deep dark reddish color with some black streaking in it. So no surprise there. We had, it's the dark colors at the bottom. That's all there is to it. But like I said, the spread is about 10 degrees or 20 degrees Fahrenheit from coolest to hottest on a 41 degree day. Now I've mentioned this stat or this ratio to people a few times before. To use with their customers, and we found that the ratio, this is rough math, this is not scientific, but roughly these decking products seem to get about 50% hotter than the ambient temperature outside. So if it's call it 100 degrees outside Fahrenheit, expect your deck to be about 150. And if it gets to 110, it'll be 155, whatever, about 50% more. It seems to be about the range. So, average temperature in a lot of climates in the middle of summer, call it around 30 degrees or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Expect your deck to get about 40 to 135 from Celsius to, 45 to 135 Fahrenheit is kind of the range you can expect. So that's warm. That's definitely gonna be warm on the Tootsies. Now, we also broke these down into just PVCs and just composites to see, was there a performance difference between PVCs and composites, because the makeup of the board is different. If you haven't listened to our other podcast that talks about the differences between PVC and composites or composites, listen to that to get the real dirty details on how they differ. But the general theme here is that they both get really hot in the sun. If they're sitting in direct sunlight, they're both going to get equally hot, and the color is going to be the primary determinant of how hot they get. If they are out of the sun, if they're in the shade, or if they have been in the sun and they suddenly get shade, the PVC products, likely as a result of their kind of porous core to them and they're not as dense, cool off almost immediately. So as soon as they get into shade, or if you spray some water on them, that temperature of the board comes down significantly right away. Composites, because of their densities, tend to hold that heat and takes upwards of an hour for that to kind of cool off once it hits the sun. So direct sunlight doesn't matter. They're both going to be hot. If you have a south-facing yard that gets sun all day, no shade, then just pick whichever color you like and whichever brand you like and the other attributes you like about a certain one. Heat is not going to be a big factor for you. However, if you're in the shade, or if you are, beside a pool, there is a slight advantage with the PVC products because they do cool off faster or cool off easier and quicker when water or shade hits them. So something to consider. Now we tested just the PVC products, and in order again, like I said, this is very much a color play here. Again, the coolest PVC product we tested in a 41 degree day, which is 106 Fahrenheit, was Clubhouse Sandstone. Came in at 64.8 degrees Celsius or 148.7 degrees Fahrenheit. On the high end was Clubhouse Hardwood Ironwood color. So we got Clubhouse at the coolest and Clubhouse at the hottest. No coincidence. It's their lightest color is the coolest and their darkest color is the hottest. The hottest one was 73.5 degrees Celsius and 164.3 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're curious about the other ones, the top 5 performing PVCs were Clubhouse Sandstone, Wolf Cypress, Golden Cypress I guess it's called, Azek Slate Gray, Vecadec in the gray color, Fibron Paramount Mineral. So common theme there, they're all light colors, light grays, light yellows, light creamy colors. The bottom 3 here were Tivadec in the ebony, so that's almost a black color, so that's no surprise. Fibron Paramount in the brownstone color, and the Clubhouse Ironwood that I mentioned as well. No surprises, really. Dark colors get hot. Now, as far as the composite / composite capstock products, we only had 2 in here that were not capstock, and those are both Moisture Shield Vantage Line products. They ranked, I would say, in the top third for least hot, but they were probably at the bottom of the top third. So there wasn't any discernible advantage to having a cap or not having a cap as far as heat goes. It was, again, color related. The top 5 performing capped composites as far as staying less hot were Moisture Shield Mochaccino, that's in the Vision Cool Deck line, TimberTech Legacy Whitewash Cedar, Moisture Shield Vision Cool Deck Cathedral Stone, Fortress Deck in the Cape Town gray color, and Wolf Perspective in the willow color. Those are the 5 that stayed the coolest in a composite product. And those temperatures ranged from 63 to 68 degrees Celsius, which is about 146 to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's the range. That's as cool as a composite deck board is going to get. On the bottom end of that, the bottom 3 were Fibron Horizon Symmetry in the burnt umber color, got to 74 degrees Celsius, which is 165.4 Fahrenheit. Second worst was TimberTech Rustic Elm and TimberTech Amazon Mist. And then we had Trex Lava Rock and Fibron Latte. So again, just a bunch of dark colors. Dark colors get hot. Surprise, surprise. I hope that was easy to follow along. As I've said 10 times here, the Coles Notes version of that is, if a customer says, does it get hot? The answer is yes, it can get hot. So does concrete, so does wood, so does the sand at the beach, so does the sidewalk. Everything gets hot when it's hot out. So there's no magic happening here with composite decking, PVC decking. It just reacts to the sun the same way everything else does. So if you're the type of person that goes to the beach and has to wear flip-flops because the sand's too hot, well, that's the same thing you're gonna have to do on your deck in a hot summer day. If you want, spray it down with some water before you go out. That does help, especially with the PVC products. Give it a quick shot with a garden hose, cool it off. That water is going to evaporate right away because of the temperature, but at least it's going to cool that deck off and let you enjoy it a little bit at a cooler temperature than what it's sitting at its ambient temperature. So I hope that kind of answers. Like I said, I'm going to try to bump these posts up so you guys can see the actual charts that we charted with these statistics on them. And hopefully it's very helpful for you. And I hope this is easy enough to follow along on with just words. Now, slipperiness. That's the second question we always get. Does it get slippery? And the answer to this is yes and no. So this is whereas the heat question was mostly related to color, this is mostly related, every line's a little bit different. So in general, PVC products have much better traction than composite products. That's a fairly accurate general statement to make. We have tested a variety of PVC products, Azek, Clubhouse, Wolf, Vecca, Fibron's Paramount line, Tivadec. There's a variety of PVC products that we've tested for heat and slip. Across the board, they have better traction than pretty much any composite. The composites that we've tried have been, the big three: Trex, TimberTech, Fibron. We've also tested, Decorators. What else we have in there? Some Moisture Shield. The list goes on and on. Fortress Deck. We've tried a lot of them, and that's the general consensus we've come up with. Now, from brand to brand, there's a big difference, though. So my Coles Notes version of PVC decking is one of the traits of PVC decking is that it's got great traction. Period. Across the board, it's great. Number one, in our opinion, for traction is Clubhouse. It has a surprising amount of grip on it, even when it's wet, but they're all really good. When it comes to composites, it's a little trickier. Not only does it change from brand to brand, but it can change within line to line. And so, for example, if we talk about Trex, I find Trex to be on the more slippery side of things, and that's pretty much across their entire lineup, whether you're talking about the Select line, the Transcend line, or even the old Enhanced line. Now, the new Enhanced line, I admittedly have not had a chance to walk on it and, spray it down outside on a full install. And no, we had a display of that deck, of that color, in the Foggy Wharf color at our home show, but that's always not a very accurate way to test things, because as a result of the fact that it's very clean inside a home show floor where there's carpet and everybody's shoes are clean and there's no water, there's not much for dust. It feels like it has great traction. Everything does, but we just haven't had a chance to try it. So the assumption is going to be that it's going to be similar to the rest of the Trex lineup, which unfortunately errs on being a little bit slick when wet especially, and even a little slick when dry. If we move on to a Fibron, we actually find that Fibron's an odd one in that their Good Life line, their entry-level board, has some of the best traction of their entire lineup. Now, Fibron has a lot of different embossing patterns throughout the different lines, and so that plays into this quite a bit, I believe. But the Good Life line, one that I have on my own deck, I don't find it to be overly slippery. I would compare it to like a Trex Transcend, so not bad, kind of average. But when you start getting up into their higher end lines, like the Fibron Horizon line and the Symmetry lines, they start to get a little bit slick. And it's no surprise, because in the Protect Advantage line and the Horizon line, it's a very smooth embossing. There's not much there for actual physical embossing to provide traction. It's not a rough surface. It's very smooth. It's slippery when dry and very slippery when wet. So if that's something of a concern for you, if you're putting a job in at an elderly person's house, that may be a concern. If this is a front step that's going to get used all the time, not just in the summer, that may be something to consider. So I would say that Fibron's high-end line, their Horizon and their Protect Advantage lines, are not very well performing as far as traction goes. Their Good Life line, a little bit better. Now, if you get up into their PVC line, great traction. So if you have somebody who's, if the product you like working with is the Fibron brand, traction is important. The best traction you're going to get in Fibron's line, by far, it's not even close, is going to be in their Paramount PVC line. So keep that in mind. When we move over to TimberTech, again, it's a little bit funky again in that the Terrain line seems to provide the best traction, which is not surprising because it is a rough surface. Very kind of like hairline, almost wheel brushed texture to it. So that does provide a bit more traction than your average composite. I would say that ranks towards the better of the composites. But when you get up into their Tropical and Legacy lines, unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, because the embossings on those are beautiful. It's just that they don't lend themselves to providing a bunch of traction. And so that is something to keep in mind as well. As you go through, most capped composites perform about the same. They're just okay for traction. They range from very slippery to just okay. The only one that actually really bucks that trend is Decorators in their new Voyage line. And so Decorators has released a Voyage line, which is a high-end premium line. It is still a composite in the fact that it has multiple materials that make up the core of the board, but it's not wood that makes up the core. But the capping on it, they have now done something to it, and I don't know the exact mechanics or science behind this, but they have got a line in this Voyage that has a traction enhanced tag on it, and it's real. We have walked on these decks. They do provide a phenomenal amount of traction. I would say comparable to, at least close, really close to Clubhouse PVC. And so I would say that the traction on the Decorators Voyage line performs like the PVC products. There's that good attraction there. So if we're talking composites versus composite, Deckorators is far out ahead on their Voyage line for that traction. The rest of their lineup, I have not tested it from start to finish, so I won't comment. I know that they are less traction than their Voyage line, but I don't know how they compare to everything else, so I'm going to leave that alone. If you guys have any questions about that, if you've had experiences with different brands and found them to be, more slippery, less slippery than you expected, or than what I've said here, please send me that information so that we can keep that in mind and make sure we're sharing the appropriate information. But that is what we found in our tests. So next time you walk into somebody's house and Karen says, and Karen's just a name, I'm picking on Karen. Does it get hot? Yes, it does, Karen. It does get hot, but here's what you can do. If you want to, if you're by a pool, choose a PVC. It'll cool off quicker when it gets wet. If you're in the shade, choose a PVC. If you're in the sun, choose whichever you want. Or just make peace with the fact that when it's hot out, things get hot, and put on a pair of shoes. That's the real answer. When it comes to slipperiness, this is a little bit more in your control. You can choose a product that has much better traction if needed. Again, those tend to be the PVCs, or Deckorators Voyage line would be great as well. But those are kind of the Coles Notes version, or answers to those two burning questions that nearly every customer has. So if there's any things that come up with you and your customers over and over again, like those two do for us, I'd like to hear about what those are, because we can do another podcast and touch on those as well. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at The Ultimate Deck Shop or at The Shane Chapman. And if you've got some out there that we want to tackle, we can follow up with another episode and take care of that. Also, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. We've got The Ultimate Deck Show on there. We're looking for content ideas for that as well. And until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any feedback, send it our way. That's everything for today. Catch us again next week.